Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Life by Design podcast. On this week's episode, I speak with Adam Lamb. Adam is a coach for men in faith, family, fitness, and finances, helping them become more purposeful leaders in every aspect of their life. In this week's episode, expect to learn the real story on testosterone, how to be a free man, how to be in the top 1%, leading by example, and much, much more. Enjoy the episode. Adam Lamb, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Mate, I think I came across, you said you're in Miami. I feel like I came across your page either via Andy Elliott or Garrett J. White or one of those guys. Are you in the world of both of them?
Yeah, it's with both of them. Yeah. So Andy and Garrett, both very good friends of mine. I'm part of the reason I'm going to Miami. I'm part of Garrett's syndicate group. So we meet quarterly. It's probably 45 of us, maybe 50 guys that will all be there. We meet quarterly. And then, Andy Elliott and I are good friends. I help him with all his health stuff, everything, all health, blood work, hormones, stem cells. Him is just about his entire team. And I deal with both those guys regularly.
I almost joined the syndicate, but then I realized being in Australia and not being able to get to those regular masterminds was going to make it quite challenging. But it looks like a fair group of fellas to be surrounded by.
Yeah, it is. You like the diversity of different businesses but critical thinkers, smart guys, everybody's kind of accomplished a decent amount of stuff, and getting that perspective from outside the box, individuals is great. And, just a brotherhood of guys that like no lying, no one cares about how cool you think you are and how big your company, none of that's there. It's just like, hey, we're real men wanting to be raw and honest and grow. And so that environment is rare. And so I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Mike, for those that don't know about the work that you do, can you give them a 60, 90-second spiel of who you are and where you've come from?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So I've been a health and wellness kind of enthusiast my entire life, right? I'm 45 years old. I kind of joke about working out when people are asking me like, hey, how do you do this? I'm like, well, I've been doing it 30 years. That's what it is. I was like 30 years of dedication. But that journey of work into working out, I did a little stint in finance for a while. But ultimately, my heart and passion was in health and wellness. And I started here in the US, a nationwide telemedicine company focused on health optimization, hormone optimization back in 2012. And kind of when no one was really doing telemedicine, it was almost taboo. Testosterone was still a little, different. We were one of the first doing peptides, things like that. And then when COVID hit, I started doing a lot of consulting because I had 150 physicians that were clients of mine, our platform. And all these guys are like, dude, COVID came. They're like, my practice is closed. I can't see my people. You're the telemedicine guy. Help me do it. So I started consulting because I also had my business running without me, right? So I'm big in helping teach entrepreneurs, primarily doctors, I'll tell you about that in a second, to own their business, not have their business run them, right? So teach them to go from provider to entrepreneur. And so I had the time and the bandwidth to go and consult for these other doctors and help them transition to telemedicine. And that led to in 2021, Tony Robbins asked me to help him launch. I've known Tony for a few years prior to this, launch his company Life Force. So I'm partners with Tony and Life Force and helped him launch that thing. And then that kind of, once Tony taps you, a lot of other people are interested. And so I just kind of skilled the consulting thing. And part of it though, I started integrating coaching because I was realizing I was helping these doctors and healthcare entrepreneurs reframe the way they spent their time in their business. And I could show them the tools and create the way, but the mindset had to change. And contractually from a consultant, I didn't have the permission as I would as a coach. And so I started coaching doctors to help them change their business and also change the way they saw their time in their presence in the business. And then I've gone on to help lots of other large companies, publicly traded companies, and certain things in the healthcare space. So I divide my time in consulting in the healthcare kind of tip of the spear stuff, stem cells, hormones, peptides, and then the rest of my time spent in coaching and consulting in the healthcare space. So pretty much all healthcare.
there's a lot even in that I'm interested in exploring.
Is that 90 seconds? Was that
It definitely wasn't, but I'm happy with it. I might as well start on a personal level, and then just a little selfish interest.
Yeah.
Peptides. Just turned 40.
Yeah.
Just about to have my first kid in 2 months. Spent a few years doing Ironmans and half Ironmans, and think that probably cooked my testosterone levels a bit. But I actually haven't. There's a lot of boys that are talking about peptides and stuff around here. I actually don't know a huge amount about it. I think we've got BPC 157, which my understanding, I'm interested in exploring what you've got to say. Could be a good avenue for me in terms of recovery, but give me like real simple insight into what I would want to consider as a 40-year-old male who wants to, I'd say keep my testosterone numbers up, but probably get them up higher than they are.
Yeah, I think when it comes to peptides, there's not a lot of peptides that help manage testosterone as much. So we'll kind of separate the conversation. And one thing I will say to you too, and this will go for all your listeners too, is if anyone's interested, I have a full peptide guide. So it is a full breakdown of like what they are, how they can help. And if you want to, whether at the end we'll put my contact information, like my social media or whatever. If anyone just pings me, I'll send them a copy of that peptide guide. And it helps just break down, because here's the deal. Someone says, hey man, I want some peptides. Well, the reality is like, what's the ailment, right? What are you looking for? So you mentioned, we'll talk about BPC 157. That's a great peptide for soft tissue repair, right? It's also a great peptide for gut health. So you can take it orally to focus on gut health. You can also take it, usually people do it sub-Q, like an injection, for soft tissue healing, right? And BPC 157 is a natural occurring peptide in your stomach. And the cool thing about peptides a lot of people don't understand, which makes them different and very competitive to the pharmaceutical companies, which have done a lot of work to keep those out of the market, is that they're amino acid based. So like your body takes them in, uses them, and your body can break them down. Where a lot of pharmaceutical drugs are made with synthetic ingredients that your body doesn't recognize. And those kind of end up turning into, if you've ever heard of like forever chemicals, like, or forever toxins really, that are in your body doesn't know what to do with, which could also lead to, well, what's the body doing? It has something it's not familiar with. It covers it up after it can't beat it. What is that thing we call that covers it up? Tumor. So a lot of the times, tumors we find in people are dedicated, or because there's something the body couldn't get rid of. Well, today in society, the things that we consume, I'm not sure the same with Australia, but I'm sure it's still better than here in the US because we're one of the worst. There's so many toxic, ingredients, synthetic ingredients in the things we consume, and our body doesn't know how to get rid of it, right? And so it stores it, and after you accumulate so much of that, the body doesn't know how to covers it up, which can sometimes lead to a tumor, cancer, so that's just probably took a little bit further than you want to know. But I say all that to say, peptides are great. From a testosterone specific standpoint, though, is getting blood work done, like seeing where you're at. And then there's, some lifestyle changes you can focus on, which is like better sleep, eat good food, certain just things from a lifestyle standpoint you can work on, exercise, obviously, things like that. You mentioned running Ironmans. I wouldn't say that's bad. I think it's good. Like the body thinks, hey, when I'm still aggressively working out and exerting myself, I must still be young. Therefore, my body needs to function a certain way, right? If you get, it's like a lot of guys get married at, late 20s and they turn into like 70-year-olds, right? They don't do anything. They stop going to the gym. They stop playing golf. They stop socializing. Sex life maybe gets slim. Maybe they're having sex once a month. So it's like, they're telling their body, I'm old. And so the body's like, I guess we're old, because your body doesn't know your age. It doesn't, right? We have a biological age and a chronological age. And so the chronological is just like how many times you get to see the sunrise. Biological age, you can have a lot to do with that biological age through the way you live, right? So like, for example, my biological age, like I said earlier, I'm 45. My biological age is 28. And I've reversed it. 3 years ago, it was 33. And so I've continued to reverse it through, but that's healthy lifestyle, right? Cold plunge, saunas, peptides, eating clean, drinking lots of water, sleeping right, all that stuff, right? And so I say all that to say that those are the things you can attack for testosterone, but a guy like in my opinion, a guy your age, 40, it's, depending on the level that you need to function, outside or exogenous testosterone could be the route, right? And so it's just a matter of checking blood work and seeing how you feel. Sometimes I always equate testosterone with an analogy with money, right? If you're like, hey, I want to buy this house, I want to buy this car, I want to have this lifestyle. Well, your current job may not, or current career may not be cutting it. You may have to increase that, right? And so if you're like maxed out at that career, this new career that maybe pays you that much more money so you can have that lifestyle is it. So I say that to say with your testosterone is you can max out what you can naturally do, right? And then once you've maxed that out with all the lifestyle stuff, even some medication you can take, pharmaceuticals that can stimulate your natural testosterone, you're still going to hit a ceiling, right? And if you're still running marathons and doing crazy stuff, and like from a body standpoint, your body's still not keeping up with what your mind wants to continue to do, then taking exogenous testosterone to raise that bar up even higher so then your body can perform at that level, then that's when it's the right choice to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. So what, again, I'm pretty kind of green to this, albeit I've got some mates in this space, but what's the downside of testosterone in terms of fertility? Like, and I assume, similar to potentially peptides, there's a range in here, but as someone who might still be in those stages of worried about their fertility and wanting to have kids, etc., is there any downside to testosterone, and is there better ones that kind of navigate that?
Yeah, great question. And so two things. First thing I would say, do people have fertility problems that don't touch testosterone? Yes.
A lot,
right?
a
So
lot.
like a lot, right? So we know like there's a lot of men and women that have trouble getting pregnant that never did any of those things. So there's probably some environmental things, right? So that's the first thing. But as it goes to testosterone specifically, when you think about when you're taking exogenous testosterone, right? So I'm adding testosterone into my body, but my body reads that, well, there's an abundance of testosterone here. We don't have to worry about making testosterone as much. And so that same process can also lower sperm count. Okay. Now, does it mean fertility issues? No, I've been on testosterone 20 years. Like, because I had a testicular injury when I was younger that lowered my testosterone as a kid. And man, you imagine almost 25 years ago, it was impossible for me to find a doctor that understood that was something, a correlation. Fortunately, I did, and which also led me down this path, the passion side of this path of doing this, right? Because it took me forever to find answers. And then I did. So I've been on testosterone personally for 20 years, right? Both my kids conceived while on testosterone, healthy boy, healthy daughter. And so it doesn't necessarily mean you can't have kids. It's just a difference of, could your sperm count be lower? Sure. But here's some things about sperm count. If you, we'll say release, or I'll just say, if you only have sex once a month, you're telling your body, again, we don't need you to make as much, versus let's say you're having sex with your wife every day. Well, the body's replenished. There's a cycle that you're training your body to function at, right? And so that's part of it. But as you age, right, if you're 30 versus 50, right, your body just, you're biologically getting older, so that even though you're chronologically getting older, so your body's willingness or ability to produce sperm and have testosterone just goes down, right? It's just part of the aging process. But I'll give you an example of a friend who's a doctor. He 48 years old and been on testosterone for 10 years straight, never took a break. He was previously married, got divorced, wasn't planning on it. They were done having kids, married a new girl, right? And she's mid-30s, he's 48. She wants to have a baby. And he's like, uh-oh. Well, he reached out, and at the time, his sperm count was 500,000, which is not a lot, okay? And so within 6 weeks, we got his sperm count up over 30 million. 10 years, 48 years old, right? So it's like, it can be done. The challenge, and why we hear so much about like, oh, if you go on testosterone, you got to be on it for life. If we go on testosterone, you'll be infertile. No, it's just none of these doctors actually know how to correct it. They don't know how to change it, right? Now, if it's like, well, hey, I'm 80 and now I want to have a kid, and I found this 30-year-old, like, it may be different at 80 years old, right? Because you're 80, not 30 or 40. So there's different variables in that situation, but for the most part, unless you have an underlying, like, predisposition or an issue with sperm count or just low testosterone, getting back to normal or coming off testosterone is not an issue if you're with somebody that knows how to do it.
And in terms of cycling, again, I'm speaking to kind of those that don't know a huge amount. Is there a downside of coming off it in terms of it dipping your testosterone or your numbers? And what's the recommended process in terms of cycling?
Yeah, so let's go back to the money analogy. So you wanted the cars, you wanted the house. We got the big pay increase, right? You went on testosterone. You're like, man, this job, it's kind of kicking my butt. I think I want to stop. I'm going to go back to my old job. Are you going to be able to keep up with the same lifestyle? No, right? And so how you feel on testosterone, right? I'll never stop taking it because I know how I feel when I'm on it. I know how I feel when I'm off it, right? When I'm on it, I like, unstoppable, right? I need less sleep. My body recovers faster. I've just more drive, more confidence, all these great things that come along with testosterone. So I'll never stop. But I know that when I'm off it, I just don't feel like I did. And it's also a reminder for me. I'm like, gosh, these guys are walking around feeling like this when they could be feeling like that. I'm not saying everybody's got to get on testosterone, but because everybody doesn't, people don't all live the same life as you. I don't live the same life as me. We all live different lives. So we have different demands for those lives. Right. And I kind of joke look, if you go home every night and have like 4 or 5 beers, eat pizza multiple times a week and fast food for lunch and like watch TV, like testosterone's not you're not gonna notice much. You might be a little increased libido, but you're not gonna notice much. But if you go kick your butt in the gym 5, 6 days a week, have an awesome sex life with your spouse, and you're like thinking and crushing it and doing big things like mentally also, because it gives you a lot of ability even from that mental tiredness, right? Then yeah, you're going to notice the shift in testosterone. So coming off is like you just go back to the normal thing. But I feel like once you've tasted it, you're like, oh, like going back to like, oh, I'm tired all the time, not as interested in sex, like I have a little more brain fog than, because it's so much better being on testosterone. Like that's just my belief, my experience in doing this for, helped over 20,000 people over 15 years doing it. So that's kind of how I think when it comes to that.
Solid. Yeah. Well, I've seen the likes of some of the boys that you've worked with over your way. What you've got 5 years on me. I think Garrett's got 7. Sean Whalen's of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking like that at 45,
You can
46.
see in those guys, if you watch those guys, you can see when they shifted, when they actually
100%.
got into testosterone, not just their body, their voice, how they're confident.
Presentation and stuff like, yeah, noticed
Everything.
it.
It's a game changer, right? And there's stuff like that goes into the psychology behind it, right? Like, are your muscles going to get bigger? Yeah, dude. If you work out, but if you don't, but how you solve problems, your ability, your mental toughness increases, right? So a lot of the guys I've worked with, they're in their 50s. They're not trying to be Mr. Bodybuilder. They're not trying to be shredded. They know that they're the capacity that they need to operate in from like just a stress problem solving, thinking quickly and having energy. Like that's why they're taking testosterone versus, they're not just trying to look like a bodybuilder, right? A bodybuilder, these big freaky muscle guys. I mean, they're taking 5, 6 times what a testosterone therapeutic dose would be, right? So it's not even the same ballpark.
So that's actually super helpful for me. Thanks for that, especially with as many runs on the board as you've got. It's good to get that kind of insight as opposed to punters who, have heard some good things and read a couple of articles on it. So for you, what's a free man?
That's a great question. And the free man is somebody that really doesn't answer to anybody and does what they want. Right now, to be a free man, you also have to be disciplined. And to be disciplined, you have to choose to do things that you may not always want to do, but they're by your choice, right? So to me, a free man is somebody that is living life on their terms, just about 100%, right? And that also is not moved, swayed, or concerned about the opinion of other men, right? And so that took a long time, I think, for me to learn that. But once you break into that piece, when you're just like, I mean, I care what God thinks of me, and that's about it. I report to him. And then I hope my wife thinks I'm a great husband, and I hope my kids think I'm a good dad. Other than that, dude, I don't care. You like me? Because here's the deal. the man that's not free is always trying to please. Right. And so if I'm always trying to please, a different version of me has to show up. And then I'm a slave to that situation versus free to be my authentic self. And when I'm free to be my authentic self, love me or hate me. There's plenty of people that hate me because of what I stand for and what I speak about. Cool. Not my tribe. There's plenty of people that love me, that want to spend time with me, that praise me. Cool. Those are my people. That's my tribe. Right. I'm not trying to please everybody, but I'm also not out trying to make enemies, but I'm going to be me, period, unapologetically. And I think that that leads into why a man can consider himself free.
Well, the type of person that you are, and what part of the reason I wanted to get you on the podcast, keeping an eye on your work over the last probably 12 months, and the Garrett J. Whites and the Sean Whalens and the Andy Elliott's, but like there's a level of polarization that comes with being a free man, but also your message stands out as opposed to these kind of beige blanket, wet rags who are just trying to appease to everyone. Was there a turning point for you that you decided to step into, like, were you a former people pleaser? Like what really brought this on for you?
That's a great question. And if I'm being honest, like, I think like a lot of us, like spending a lot of my life wanting to be accepted, like wanting to fit in, right? Like there was that part, like as a child, like my parents were divorced, and I lived in an area in a time when like I was the only kid whose parents were divorced. So it's like, we didn't have money. Like I was kind of like one of the poor kids. So like there's always these reasons of this, these scars of not feeling good enough, not feeling like I fit in, not being part of like the things I want to be a part of. All the kids doing cool vacations, and we're like, we couldn't afford to do it. So like I saw all this stuff growing up, um, and then it leads to just like focusing on our self-worth through external things, right? Like social media, Instagram. You can scroll Instagram for 20 minutes and feel like a freaking loser, right? Because you're like, oh, they got that car. Like, and then there's a part though that I think within every person, and this probably leads into the free man piece, where all of a sudden you're like, no, I like me, right? Whether you like me or don't like me. And so I think I lived a lot of my life feeling insecure, and I couldn't like totally, like my wife, like when I met her, I was a bartender, and she was, like pretty successful career, like where I'm like, what the hell does this chick think? Like, what does she see in me? Right. And she had told me, she's like, hey, I saw your potential. And I'm like, thank God you did, because I didn't. And so, we can live in, we're in a society that constantly tells us we're not good enough. Right. And then, so going through that process, and then for me, I became a Christian late in life. And so then I was like, oh, I got to fit into this box. I got to do this and say this. And I was like, this is why I don't like these Christian people, right? Because I was trying to abide by this like rules and religion, and think of, when you think of like the religion of the world of like, you're supposed to do this and go to school and go to college and do this and say this and do this and get married. Like there's like all these, society rules, and trying to keep up with that is insane. Right. And so then I reached a point where I was like, I'm confident in who I am as a man. I'm confident in who I am as a husband and a father. And those are the people that actually really matter to me. And I'm confident in my ability to make money and support my family. And I was like, dude, I'm not changing. I'm just going to be me. Right. If because I used to think like, oh, I got to go to these men's Bible studies, for example, and like try to fit in. And I'm like, dude, these aren't my people. Right. Like I want to talk about building $100 million companies. And if you think I'm weird for doing that or wrong, like I don't want to be around you. Where's my tribe? Right. And so that's what like this 1% is, that my company is, because it's like, I'm a 1% person, right? Not saying I'm better than anyone. I'm just differently in the way I want to operate. I want to be in the top 1% of husbands, top 1% of fathers, top 1% earners, top 1% of serving the kingdom of God. And so with that, well, of course, I'm not going to fit in with 99% of people. If I want to be in the top 1%, 99% of people I won't be able to connect with. Right. And then it was like accepting that and be like, oh, I can't try to please these people. I can't try to fit into these people because they're not me. They're not my people. Right. And that on the opposite, that is, if I am loud and consistent and authentic with who I am, my guys will find me. Right. And someone like you, who I'm like, I don't, we don't know each other that well, but I know you're my guy. Like, I know we could hang out. We could probably go on vacation together. And like, I know it. Cause like, but you had a chance to see my content, and my content is actually consistent with who I am. Cause there's also a lot of people, you'll see their content on social media, and then you meet them and you're like, what? Like, you're not even who you look like with all your million followers. And so like, that's the other part of it too, is I also want to be who you're expecting to be, because that's who I am. I talk to, like, our conversation, how I talk to my kids, how I talk to my wife, how I talk to my pastor, how I talk to my customers, all that stuff. Right. So then it's like the energy that I need to just be me is so much easier than the energy of trying to please all the different people. Right. And so then just had that shift. It was probably honestly like 2 years ago when that happened. So a long time. I think most people go to their grave never doing that.
Yeah, it's I think it's like the number one regret of the dying. A chick, Bryony West or something, wrote a really good book about the 5 wishes of the dying. Scary to think that you would get to that stage of life and realize that you haven't lived a life true to yourself, and realize that it's too late. And we all kind of know it, like on a conceptual level, that we should, but the actual embodiment of it and showing up on a daily basis is a very different thing. So one of the things that stood out to me with both you and Garrett over the last, excuse me, couple of years is, and you said it there, so I'm interested in how you've kind of navigated this piece around Christianity, religion, knowing that you don't fit into the norm. How did you step into your relationship to God, but not fit necessarily the mold? Like, how have you navigated your own rules or your own kind of calling within that, knowing that your average everyday Christian's probably very different and has a very different relationship than you do?
Yeah, it was hard because, so here's the deal, man. I had no background in religion, but I believe God wanted it that way, because when someone's like, what denomination? Lutheran, Protestant, Baptist, Catholic. I'm like, dude, I don't know. I don't know what any of that was. And like, to my knowledge, I don't think any of that existed in the Bible either. Like that's all man-made stuff, right? But what I'll tell you, a person gave me this book about 7 years ago, 7 years ago in January. It's called Jesus Calling. I opened it up. I was like, oh, it's nice. It was like positive. I've been like, not really into the Christian stuff, but I'll check it out. And just God spoke to me. Like, I heard God was like, hey, I've always been here. Even when you denied me, look at your life. You should be dead, divorced, in prison. Like, and I was like, holy, I had this experience. And that's all I knew, is I had an experience I had never had before, where I heard from God and it said Jesus calling. That's it. If it would have said Muhammad or Buddha, or like, I would have gone another route, right? Or God, it didn't say that, right? So I was like, man, that was wild. What do I do now? I didn't know the Bible. I went and bought a Bible. And I had a friend of mine, then coincidentally, next day, this is all God, who's my most Christian friend, called me. We talked, and I was like, hey man, it's funny you called. I think I want to have a closer relationship with God. And he said, Adam, listen, man, it sounds weird, but God woke me up this morning with you heavy in my heart to call you. Didn't know if something was happening with you, because it was right after I moved to Texas. And he's like, here's what God told me. And I was like, okay. And before, I would have thought this was crazy, but now being down this faith journey, it like all makes sense. And he's like, I've known you your whole life. You're not a big rules guy, but I've never met anyone that builds relationships like you do. And I want you to focus on the relationship, not the rules. He's like, you'll get turned off. He's like, get to know who Jesus was. I was like, cool. What do I do? Buy a Bible. Okay, where should I read? Start reading here. I'm like, okay. And that's just what I did. And so then I started reading the Bible in with just total naked eyes, right? Just like a virgin to religion. I didn't know any of this stuff. I'm just reading the book, right? And in doing so, I'm reading about like power and blessing and healing. Like, I'm reading about all this awesome stuff. Like, I'm like, wow. And I'm like, so then I would start like trying to watch some sermons on YouTube and maybe check out a couple churches. And I'm like, why don't these pastors, do they believe this? Like, are they reading the same thing? Do I have a different version? I'm like, well, maybe I'm reading the wrong version. And so I had this struggle. And then what it did though, is it finally, I kind of just was like, all right, I guess I have to mold in to fit into this box. And I was like that for like 3-4 years. And then I met this pastor. He's an evangelist named Jonathan Shuttlesworth. And he's just like a fire. I mean, like just like next level kind of preacher. And he preached and spoke about what I was reading. And so I was like, there is somebody, right? And so like him and I really connected, and I run his business ministry he's got a one of the fastest growing churches in America, and I run the business ministry for his church. So I fly to Pittsburgh, so I'll go there next week, and I run like a Wednesday meeting of entrepreneurs all come, people that want to be in it, and I blend like business and the Bible and mindset and self-development, like biblically into that, right? And I love doing it. It's one of my favorite things. But what I realize is, again, same thing, is I have a tribe, dude. I got Christians that love me, that just I motivate them. They hear the stuff. They just totally pick up what I lay down. They believe the way I do. I have other Christians that are like, you're the Antichrist, like you're some Nazi, like whatever. Like there's just like, they're like, it's hilarious, but because at the end of the day, it's religion, right? Just like society. There's a religion that says you have to live a certain way, go to school, get good grades, take these classes, do this stuff, do this, like retire at 65. That's a religion, dude. Just like any other religion is a religion. But what do you actually believe? And what you actually believe, do you actually live it? And if you don't believe it. You're full of crap. So what do you actually believe, right? And so that kind of, I mean, hopefully that answers the question a little bit, but it was a similar situation. Is there's things I say about God, my relationship with God, religious people don't understand. They don't agree with. I don't care. Those are the church people. They may not be my people. I love church. I go to church all the time, but some people aren't my people. But there's a lot of them that have they want a taste of that fire. They want a taste of that authenticity. They want to step into what they really believe. And those people too, on the church, the Christian side, those are the people that, maybe find someone like me or like a Garrett that are like, dude, you say it different. Like, but I'm saying the same stuff, but they just hear it differently.
What do you think? And I'm trying to work out whether this is my kind of algorithm and filter bubble that's brought me closer to the likes of you over the last kind of 4 or 5 years. But my feeling is that there's been a larger influx and more people turning back to God, whatever that might mean to them. I asked someone on the podcast this a few weeks ago, and he gave a really interesting view. I'm interested in yours. He's like, well, I think a lot of people put their faith and hope in governments, etc., and then have been brought the light of that and turned it elsewhere, e.g. into religion, into their own source of God. Has that been the case in your world, that more people have turned back towards it? And in your eyes, what do you think is the reason for it?
Yeah, great question. And I think there's two parts. So I think you're on the lines of correct with like putting our faith into government, but really like putting our faith into people is part of it, and realizing like people let you down. Like there's so much, there's so much out there that is people we don't really know. You know what I mean? Like we haven't solved and figured out. So I think there's a part of a humbling situation of, as we learn more, we learn what we don't know. And as we learn what we don't know, we realize there may be something beyond what we've figured out how to categorize. And so that's thing number one. I think thing number two, and I think this started during kind of the pandemic, is more things started surfacing of like wickedness, evilness, bad people doing bad stuff, like right under the noses of everybody. And people realizing a bit more that like there's good and evil. Because here's the deal: without evil, it's very hard to understand good, right? You might just have like, you have like nice and better and a little bit better and great and really sweet. But like when you see evil and you're like, dude, I'm nothing like that. That's evil. I'm not like that. I didn't know that existed. And so if that can exist, is there a possibility of this other, like a spiritual evilness that someone has? And then is there like, well, I don't want to be part of that. How do I be part of this spiritual goodness of like someone would hurt kids like that, do that? Like, I love kids. Like I want to protect, like it makes me angry. So like, I know I'm wired different. Is it something in my heart? Like what is, so we start questioning ourselves based on some things we start discovering. And I think it comes from discovering evil and wickedness. And then I think the other thing is I truly believe this. I believe God is calling Old Testament style warriors up to, because the happy clappy pastor whatever, the standing on stage or whatever, at the pulpit is not doing it. And I think God is grabbing guys that are more warrior mentality, guys that other men that are like looking for things. We have a massive masculinity issue too in this country, right? And we have, I'd say, globally, right? And so when you start seeing these strong men that are confident, they're good men, right? They're good. They might swear a little bit and they might, yell and throw weights around or something like that, but they're men that other younger men are like, oh, I want to be like that dude. I don't want to be like this wiffle waffy, wet sock, happy clappy guy who I can just tell is full of crap, right? And so there's more of these men that I feel like God's getting a hold of their heart of, and those men are getting more men involved. And here's the deal: at the end of the day, like, my wife wasn't very religious either, but you ask my wife, hey, do you have a better husband who follows God or a husband who didn't? And she's going to say, without a doubt, her godly version of her husband is way better of a man. She would have never said, I wish you would be more Christian or more religious, because she didn't connect to the value in it. But once she saw what the Christianity did inside the man, she's like, I'm in, I'm all in. And I think more women are seeing that shift in those men too. And then, which is leading them to God, because we're called as men to be the spiritual leader of our home. And so as we follow that biblical, pattern that we're supposed to do, as the men rise, it brings more men that want to, or connect with that. Like, who wants to be some fat, broke lion at the pulpit pastor, right? Like, think of most pastors, out of shape, broke, sexless marriage, like just guys who you can hear them talk and you're like, dude, stop lying. Like, you're right. And so when they see another dude, they're like, dude, that's truth. Like, I like this because he's power and conviction and lives it, breathes it consistently every single day, doesn't care what things. I want to be like that guy, because that's how the Christians were when they first started. Like, why Christianity grew is they were the crazy guys, fearless, bold, not scared to get killed for what they believe, right? And so, like, everybody wanted to be a Christian because that's who they were. And I believe that God's calling those men back up, and women, to rise, because the men that took the assignment are failing, and then there's going to be a new age of men doing it. That's my big picture on the whole thing. But that's what I believe it is. And when you look at what's happening, is that because that's what this world needs: bold, strong, I would say violent but loving, capable, violent but loving men to lead what's right and good, right? And other people are going to go, I want to be like that too, because I am good. Like, I like people. I want to be a good person. Okay, that's what this guy does. Okay, I'm going to learn about what he thinks and believes and pick up a Bible, and it just goes from there. Like, that's what I've seen it happen, and it's a beautiful thing. And God's did the same thing with me, right?
How have you navigated that with, I completely agree with the masculinity struggles, and they're probably worse in Australia than they are in the US. How have you navigated that with your son? Because I can only assume that he's gone through this woke emasculation, demonizing of men for the last 5 years, and as he's kind of still sorting his sense of self out, how have you navigated that as a father?
It's a good question. Here's the first thing: nobody parents my kid but me.
Mm.
Okay? So not school, not TikTok. Like, he may like my kid likes Drake. I don't like Drake. I get it. I don't agree with it, but I also have to let him be him, right? But me and my personality as a man, I don't waver to my children, right? My children learn because I lead by example, right? So, like, imagine that's the other part too. If you're a father and you're full of crap, if you're telling your kid to do this, this, and this, but yet you are doing the exact opposite, right? I don't drink, I don't party, I'm not doing dumb stuff. I'm not displaying a life. I'm displaying a life of discipline, honor, doing these things. And so my kids get to see that. And they also get to see the fruit, right? Like, they get to see, like, dad drives a Lamborghini. Dad's got a nice house. Like, dad's not full of crap. Like, he says, do this, this, and this, and then this and this and this happens. Okay, he does it. He does go to the gym. Like, so I think as a father, leading my children by design, like through discipline and through living what I lead, that that helps set a standard. But I've always been that way. Like, so for me as a father, I never talk to my son like a kid. I talk to him just like I'm talking to you, right? He's 16 now, but in because I wanted him to not be a subject to this woke world. Like I joke, you could take my kid and drop him, my son, and drop him in like 1992, and he'd fit in, right? Like his buddies, his crew of buddies, they're just normal boys. Do they do dumb stuff like unplug people's Christmas lights and like, like do like prank stuff and toilet paper houses? Yeah, normal boys. They don't think they're girls, right? They're not like dyeing their hair purple and becoming a they and a bunch of no. I would be way more disappointed in that rather than toilet paper someone's house and be a normal boy. So like I've been not strict but straight with what a man looks like, how what a man does, and talk about honor and things like that. And I live it, right? I think there's a lot of parents that don't lead what, or they don't live what they're trying to lead. And so their kids, they don't know what to do. And think of when you think of how many just beta men that they're so scared to speak up. They don't want to stir the pot, right? They're trying to people please. I got to please everybody. I got to please my boss. I got to please my wife. I got to please my kid. I got to please, like, their kids see that and they're like, oh, no back. So then who's going to lead? Well, whoever's more consistent, media, all these other things that are more consistently in front of your kid because you're not consistent. And so that's been a big thing, I think, to answer the question that I think specifically for us and for our house is that.
So going back to something you said earlier, as a former bartender and someone who grew up without a huge amount of money, how did you find your relationship with money through your 20s, 30s, and 40s? Because I assume there's a blueprint that wasn't necessarily going to serve you in terms of, where you've got yourself to now and the cars that I love seeing of yours on social media. Who did you need to become in order to have this relationship with money and the level of success that you've had?
Yeah, I think number one, I had to believe I deserved it, right? So I think there's a lot of people struggle with, they go through this build and burn process of like achieving something, screw it up, get the girl, the dreams, figure out how to wreck it, right? Start making good money, get a drug problem, there's just find these ways because subconsciously they don't believe they deserve it. They figure they're going to lose it anyway, right? And I did that in my marriage for, probably the first third of it. Is like, I'm like, when is this chick going to wake up and leave, right? So like our marriage was just always like on edge because I'm like, when is she going to wake up and leave? And then I snapped out of it and was like, what if I became the man I believe my wife actually deserves? And so I went down that path. And then I became this guy and then through that process, I got more confident with who I was, where I'd be like, she'd be crazy to leave me, right? So, but through the evolution of becoming that man that I knew my wife deserved, the guy that I'd be scared could swoop my wife from me, I just became that guy. And becoming that guy, I had to look at everything else different too. And so, I think I had a lot of scarcity around money growing up, like in and so there was a part of like it just wasn't tangible, wasn't real. And then I had to start hanging out with people that made certain, to me, like I remember like if you made 100 grand a year, like you were rich, right? And then it's like you get to a point where you hang out with other people that it's like, oh, if you don't make 100 grand a month, like how do you even survive? Like, and I'm like, you meet these other people, I'm like, oh, dude, my monthly bills are $1 million a month. I'm like, what? I need to get two planes, right? So it's like there's a part of just stretching and leveling up and getting in those circles, right? And so a lot of people want to be, we'll call it king of the crap heads or whatever, that the guys that want to be the top of their little circle, right? It's like they got the nicer house or the nicer car, and and they just stop growing because they're superior in their circle versus the guy that's like, all right, I need to get new circles, right? Some of the guys that you mentioned, I hang out with like Garrett and like a Sean or Andy Elliott, like those are a level way higher than me. And so I want those guys in my circle not to ever feel bad about myself, but because I want to continue to I want to learn from them, right? And then reading like these books. I mean, that's another big part. I read over 500 books in 10 years, right? And through this self-evolution, like waging war on myself, like I was like, everything that doesn't serve me has got to die and I want whatever is good to grow. And so willing to burn me down so I don't burn my marriage down, so I don't burn my business down, so I don't burn my relationship with my kids down, so I don't burn my body down. I quit drinking alcohol too, like 8.5 years ago. And that was a big change. Um, because I was just focused on this constant evolution of getting better. And so with money, I had to be around other people that had the kind of money I wanted because it just made it more normal. Right. So like, it was just, if everybody around you is making $1 million a year, like it becomes like more real than you're the only person who makes $500,000 a year in your circle. Then like, dude, you're never gonna get to 1 million. It's not real. It won't be real, or you'll struggle psychologically with it. So I think that hopefully that answers a few different ways of how I think that had to change for me. But really the foundation was I had to believe that I deserved it and it was doable.
I think something that stands out to me that you just said there, that I love, and that it is the mindset of the 1%, is waging a war on yourself. Like most people are trying to find different ways to hide and not dive into that deep, dark cave that is like the freedom on the other side. And yet people like you are seeking the corners of your psyche to find that. Is that something that you're noticing in terms of the circles you now mix with?
For sure. And that's where, like I mentioned, being, with the mastermind group I'll be with later the rest of this week is like, we're in there going like, dude, tell me what I got to work on. Like, we're like, beat me up. We don't take it personal. And kind of joke, like if you coming into that group and you're like, oh, here's what I've done. And I sold this company into this, like, dude, we're going to kick your ass. Like it's not going to happen. Like, because we don't want it. Great. Awesome that you're really good at a certain thing. But like, what do you need to work on, right? How is your marriage? Like, where is it? Like, we want to, because these are the things that really build us, right? We have to be 1%. Is about being in the top 1% in all areas of life. And so you would never drive a car with one flat tire, but most people are operating with like 3 flat tires, right? It's like, cool, you made a lot of money, but you're out of shape. Your wife hates you, your kids hate you, and you have no relationship with God or any spiritual connection. Like, dude, we got a lot of work to do, right? And then what happens is when you work on those things, more money, like, everything just gets going, right? And so I think that's a big part of it. And it comes to just having the ability to, I was probably 33 years old, and I just came to this part with myself and I'm like, what the hell is, like, what am I doing? Because I was like, what I put my confidence in, or I wouldn't even say confidence because it probably was fake confidence, but my self-worth in is I was like, well, I got muscles. I was pretty good at fighting. I was really good at picking up chicks, right? So I was like, so I could pick up chicks, like, the nightclub scene, in my muscles, and I could I could fight guys. I was like pretty good at fighting, right? And so, but how does that help me be a successful husband? How does that help me be a successful father? How does that help me build a successful business, learn how to do it? It doesn't. So every single thing that I really thought was so great in my, like, let's call it 20s, to early 30s, I had to let go. I had to kill it, right? Because if I didn't burn that to the ground, because you hold on to it, dude. You will hold on to those pieces of, it's like how those dudes I'll talk to, they're like in their 40s talking about when they played high school football. Like, bro, you can't run 50 yards right now. Don't tell me about a high school football game that you played in until then. Like, tell me about what you did last week in the gym, right? Or tell me about what you're going to do this week in the gym. I don't want to hear about 30 years ago. And so, but we hold on to these things because they give us a certain feeling of pride and success. But the reality is it's fake, because it doesn't exist anymore. It's the past, right? And so I had to look at that and I was like, everything that I find myself worth in is gone, right? Unless I became single again. If my wife leaves me, okay, so maybe I'll hold on to being able to pick up chicks and like maybe, okay, I'll hold on to that, right? And it wasn't until I had to let that go. Like, no, dude, why don't you just stay married the rest of your life and like have an awesome, oh, I didn't think of that. Okay, well, maybe I'll do that. Well, then I got to let this go and I got to pick up something else, right? So, and then it became the self-development path.
And in your world of business coaching and helping these healthcare practitioners, is that something that you see a lot of? These guys essentially being one-trick ponies. From what you said earlier, that it sounds like making plenty of bank, potentially stuck in their business. And I'm guessing they're dropping the ball in other areas of their lives as well.
Yeah, for sure. And they still, I mean, they have a lot of, I'll say trauma. I don't really like the word, but like trauma from the past. I mean, imagine like a guy going through college and medical school, those guys, they're not rich, right? Typically, usually, right? So there's like some financial stuff, student loan debt. So like you asked me a question about, what changed with me with money. A lot of these doctors out there have serious scarcity issues around money and rules around money and all these kind of things. And I've had like one of my docs recently, this guy was driving, I think I helped him. When he first started working with me, he was making about 350, 400. First year working with me, we cracked like that 850. And I think this 2025, he'll make over 2 million. But he's still driving this 2015 like Acura MDX or something, like with like 180,000 miles on it. And I'm like, dude, every time you get into that car, you're a broke medical student. Are you still a broke medical student? No. You're a pretty successful doctor, aren't you? Yes. And you're building even more success, aren't you? Yes. What kind of car do you want to drive? An Escalade. Go get the Escalade. Like I'm to the point, not with everybody, but in the certain situations where I'm like, we will not do another call until you show me you bought the Escalade. Right. So it's like getting them. And then all of a sudden, guess how they feel every day when they get in that Escalade to go into work. He feels like the guy who is and who he's becoming. Right. So certain things from their past can hold them back. And then a lot of it is just habitual. Like if they know how to get their gratification, just like maybe I got my gratification from picking up girls and getting in fights, they get their gratification from seeing every patient, right? But the reality is I can't have them seeing every patient, because if they're seeing every patient, they're trading time for dollars. So we start implementing like what it has to look like to grow their business, to hire a mid-level to come into their business, and then the mid-level comes in, so they're buying back their time. And how do we scale? And I mean, like, a doctor, even the guy I was just talking about, a year ago, he's a solo provider. He was the one guy. Now he has 5 mid-levels, right? And works half the amount of time. And now he gets to spend more time hanging out with his wife, taking the kids off her plate sometimes, going to the gym more, like doing like the guy's on vacation more than I like he's done more vacation in 6 months than he did in the last probably 10 years. Right. But it's about reconnecting his marriage needs to mature and all these other things. And so it's like opening those kind of doors. And so as a coach, I can do that. As a business consultant, it's like, it's a little iffy because I can see these problems, but I can't address them as a consultant, but as a coach, I can. And that's where I really open the door from the coaching standpoint, is then I get permission to talk about everything.
I really liked your piece around the car piece, and I feel like Dan Martell's got something like the McLaren mindset or something like that.
Yeah.
A shift in mindset was something that most people would deem, the Dave Ramsey, I think one of your guys might call it. Might call it a bad investment or something. But what did you notice for you in terms of how did you feel different when you up leveled, something that most people might see as a waste of money?
Yeah. And so I'll tell you, it goes back to me for my first car. So my first car was a 1977 Chevy Impala, and it didn't have reverse. Okay. So and I lived in an area where like the Chrysler CEO's kid went, like I lived in Michigan, and a lot of like, it was like an area where you had trailer parks, but you also it was up and coming. Now it's a really nice area, but it was the nice new place people were moving. So there was some decent money, but there's also like kind of poor kids like me. And so I had friends that like, I had a friend, dad's owns a car dealership. Like this guy's Cadillac, he's driving like Ford Probe, like cool, all these cool cars. And so and I've always loved cars, right? But this was my first car. And every time I get in that car, I hated it. It didn't have reverse, dude. So like I would have to like park far away and pull through. And if for some reason I didn't do it, like I'd have to like get out and it's a 77 Impala. Like this thing's bit like a picture like a full size SUV, but ugly and blue. And so like I had self-esteem problems around it. And then my next car was a 1984 Pontiac Sunbird, and it had the driver's side door didn't open, and it had no exhaust. So when I would pull up at school, it was like "Meow, meow, 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 meow," super loud. Everybody looks, and then I had to crawl across my car to get out. The trunk never opened. I don't even know what was in it. So like I felt like such a piece of crap in those cars. And then I started my first full-time job right out after high school, was painting houses, making $10 an hour, working 50 hours a week. So I'm making $500 a week. And the guy, he hated my car too. He's like, this car's a piece of crap. Because sometimes I drive to his house we'd take like the paint wagon. And so I was like, yeah, I was thinking about getting a Jeep Wrangler. And so he's like, well, hey, if you need me to like write something to the, credit union, this is my first car loan. And I got this Jeep Wrangler. And dude, I felt like the man. And from that moment on, I was like, I will never, if I get to sleep in my car, I will never drive a car that I don't feel good in. And this was, I was 20 years old and never looked back. Right. I mean, like I bought a first Cadillac. I was driving it like, when I was bartending, man, I was, 21 years old, making 80 grand a year. Like I'd worked clubs the most I ever made was like $1,600 a night. I mean, we would have like good $300 to $400 a night was like the mid low up to $1,000. We would do really well. I worked in some of the biggest nightclubs and kind of VIP places in Detroit. But so early, man, I had to have that car. I had to have the Yukon Denali when that first came out, and I'd never looked back. But I'll tell you something. When I first bought my first kind of like supercar or sports, like I remember I first got a Bentley, which is like 2019. I think I bought like a Bentley Continental GT. Imposter syndrome. I felt like I don't deserve it. I'm faking it. I'm not, but I guess like in my head, I mean, obviously I could afford it, but I felt this imposter syndrome, and it was a new thing for me to wrestle. And so I had to wrestle with that for a while, and it felt dirty for a long time. I felt like I was a fake, like I was a fraud. And I had to like look back at the stackable evidence where I'm like, no, dude, like you own like multiple companies, you make good money, you got like this, nice, like you deserve the Bentley. Like, but it took a long time. Today, I don't wrestle with that stuff anymore. But there was a part of that dip. It like dipped down where I was like, ooh, because it was like a new level, right, of a car that. And Bentley's not, you can pull up in just about any normal car that's expensive, but you pull up in the Bentley and you just get attention, right? There's an expectation that people have of somebody with a Bentley, right? And same with the Lamborghini, Ferrari, any of those, Rolls Royce. But I still was, and part of that is I still thought about the opinion of other people versus like, F you, I'm gonna drive whatever I want because I feel good about it. Who cares, right? And so I had a little bit of that wrestling thing. Now, for me, I love cars, so I have full freedom in it. I'm a free, like, to your original question, I'm a free man. One of my favorite things is getting in my Lamborghini is what I have right now, and just starting that thing up and just driving it. And I just feel like a kid. I feel like that 8-year-old boy who grew up struggling, didn't have a dad, lost his house. He's going, woo, because I'm driving this dream car I've never even seen in person. And I get to, like, that child in me wakes up and like thanks me every single time I start that thing, right? And that's priceless. And that has nothing to do with you or my neighbor or my friend. Like, that's for me, right? That has to do with that boy inside of me that's like, thank you for not quitting. Thank you for burning down all the BS that you had to, and for building who you've become. Thank you, right? So like, there's a part of that too that's like really rewarding when it comes to the car stuff.
That's awesome. Mate, for those that want to find out more about you and the work that you do, where's the best spot to send them?
Yeah, I would say Instagram is probably where I'm most active. It's Adam Lamb 33. That would be the best place. LinkedIn, but Instagram's the spot.
Awesome. Mate, thanks for jumping on. As I said, I've loved watching your content over the last kind of 12 months in particular, and awesome to have an opportunity to speak to you today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. And it was a wonderful conversation. So thanks for asking so much and letting me talk and share. I appreciate it.